You can have my company if you beat me with that junk. Those were the words that cracked through the parking lot like a challenge thrown by a king who believed his crown could never slip. People froze. Phones lifted. Whispers scattered like sparks on dry pavement. And standing in the middle of it all was Daniel, old, calm, holding the keys to a battered 1930 Cadillac that looked like it had survived 3 generations of storms. Across from him stood Mark, the millionaire who loved nothing more than control, applause, and the red Ferrari that gleamed like a weapon under the afternoon sun. But this time, something in the air felt different, heavier, more dangerous. Before we dive deeper into this story, one that spiraled far beyond a simple race, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us keep bringing powerful stories like this to life. Stories where pride gets tested and character steps forward in unexpected ways. Stick with us until the very end. Now, let's begin right where tension first tightened its grip on that sun-baked pavement, where a single parking space lit the fuse for everything that followed. Mark always liked the feeling of people stepping aside when he arrived. Every morning, the path cleared for him, the world seemed to bow, and the roar of his Ferrari filled the lot like an announcement of superiority. But on that particular afternoon, his rhythm fractured. His usual parking spot was occupied, claimed, even by Daniel's dusty old Cadillac, a relic that seemed to belong in a museum more than a corporate driveway. Mark stopped mid-stride. His guests, a trio of investors hungry for his approval, halted behind him. One whispered, "Who parked that fossil here?" Mark's jaw twitched, irritation simmering under his skin. Heat radiated from the pavement, and the scent of old engine oil drifted from the Cadillac like a memory refusing to die. Employees lingered nearby, drawn by the strange clash of eras. Then Daniel appeared, walking toward the old car with a steady rhythm, his keys jingling softly at his side. He didn't notice, or pretended not to notice, the growing crowd. He wiped his palms on a towel, studied a smudge on the fender, and unlocked the door. That calmness, that unbothered silence, struck Mark harder than any insult could. "You parked here," Mark said, stepping forward like a judge preparing a sentence. Daniel looked up, blinking once as if the question had surprised him, though his voice stayed even. "Only spot left." Mark laughed, a cold, sharp sound designed to entertain the crowd. "And you thought putting this junk beside my Ferrari was a good idea?" His guests exchanged raised brows. Someone lifted a phone. Another employee muttered quietly, "This is going to get ugly." Still, Daniel remained unmoved. He adjusted his glasses and inspected the Cadillac's mirror, the simplicity of his gestures making Mark feel strangely ignored. That only fueled the millionaire's anger. "Do you know who owns this place?" Mark hissed, but Daniel didn't adopt the fear the man was trying to provoke. "Doesn't change where the open space was," he replied, polite but firm. The crowd thickened, forming a human circle that hummed with curiosity and expectation. Mark felt the attention gathering around him like stage lights he had learned to crave. "You know what?" he said, pointing to both cars with theatrical flair. "Let's make this interesting." He leaned in close enough to let his arrogance fill the space. "Race me. If that antique beats me, the company is yours." Shock rippled through the watching employees. Phones angled upward like hungry eyes. Someone whispered, "He can't be serious." Another replied, "He's showing off." Again, Daniel blinked slowly, letting the words settle, letting the weight of the challenge fold itself into the silence. "You want to race over a parking spot?" Mark grinned. "No, I want to show everyone what power looks like." His palm brushed the Ferrari's glossy hood, as if it were a crown he was polishing. Daniel stood still, the sunlight catching the faint silver at his temples. He placed a hand on the Cadillac, fingers tapping the worn metal as though listening to an old friend. He looked back at Mark. "You're sure?" That question wiped the smirk off a few faces in the crowd. For a moment, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and hot rubber. Mark nodded confidently. "Absolutely." Daniel gave a single shrug. "All right." And just like that, the parking lot transformed into a battlefield drawn by lines of pride and asphalt. Workers moved toward the far end of the lot, forming a path for the cars. The quiet anticipation grew deeper, sharper. A story was beginning, one everyone would retell. By the time Mark and Daniel reached the makeshift starting point, nearly half the building had followed, footsteps echoing like the murmurs of an approaching storm. Daniel opened the Cadillac's hood, moving with a slow, practiced precision. He tightened a strap, adjusted a hose, and nudged a stubborn latch as if he'd tended to this machine his entire life. No rush, no spectacle, just care. Meanwhile, Mark strutted around his Ferrari, revving the engine until the noise thundered through the lot. This beauty hit 60 in 3.5 seconds, he boasted loudly, making sure every camera captured his confidence. The crowd murmured, fascinated more by the contrast than the cars themselves. Daniel wiped a spot from the Cadillac's mirror and said quietly, "Didn't think we needed an audience for a small race." A few people laughed, unsure whether it was a joke or a warning. Mark smirked. Let him talk. He'll be eating dust soon enough. Engines growled. The sun bore down. A supervisor raised her hand. On my signal, the moment stretched, tight, electric, breathless. Then her voice cut through the silence. 3, 2, 1, go. Mark launched forward the instant the signal dropped, the Ferrari leaping like a beast hungry for applause. The tires screamed, clawing at the asphalt as the red blur cut through the lot with the intensity of a man desperate to prove something. Maybe to the crowd, maybe to himself. Cheers erupted behind him. Someone yelled, "He's gone." No contest. Another laughed. The old guy hasn't even started yet. Daniel, meanwhile, pulled off the line with quiet steadiness. The Cadillac moved like the passing of time itself, slow, measured, unbothered. No screeching tires, no roar, just a low hum that trembled softly in the air. Some employees laughed, others shook their heads. But those closest to Daniel noticed something different in his stillness, an almost unsettling calmness. He wasn't trying to win the crowd. He wasn't performing. He was simply driving. Halfway down the lot, the Ferrari stretched its lead, engines screaming triumphantly. Mark felt the familiar surge of control pulsing through him. This was his territory, his moment, his spectacle. Yet beneath the engine's howl, something gnawed, an invisible thread of unease tugging gently at his spine, whispering that this display of power was costing him more than he realized. The crowd followed from a distance, jogging along the edges of the route, phones raised like lanterns chasing a legend. "This is going straight online," someone panted. The Ferrari streaked ahead, sunlight flashing across its polished frame. Mark smirked behind the wheel, imagining the headlines, the admiration, the way people would talk about this moment in the halls tomorrow. But then something shifted. The roar of the Ferrari dipped for a split second, a tiny stutter that prickled across Mark's skin. He frowned, adjusting his grip on the wheel. "Come on," he muttered. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The pedal resisted. A small warning light blinked. Then another. Then a third. Heat spiked through the cabin, radiating from the engine bay like the breath of something wounded. Mark's smirk disappeared. He slammed the pedal again. The engine coughed, an ugly, rattling choke that didn't belong to a machine built for dominance. The Ferrari lurched forward, shuddered, then died. Just died. Silence swallowed the interior. For a moment, Mark didn't move. He stared at the dash, stunned, the weight of humiliation sinking into his chest like a cold stone. He flung the door open, stepping into the unforgiving sunlight. Heat shimmered off the asphalt. Sweat seeped across his forehead, equal parts panic and disbelief. In the distance, the soft hum of the Cadillac grew louder, steady, rhythmic, relentless. Workers jogging beside the cars slowed, confusion wrinkling their faces. "Is it broken?" someone whispered. No way this is happening." The Cadillac continued its slow approach, its rattling body carrying a strange kind of dignity with each bounce. When Daniel reached Mark, he eased the old machine to a stop beside the paralyzed Ferrari. He leaned out the window slightly, his voice calm. "Need a lift?" A few people snorted nervously, unsure whether they were allowed to laugh. Mark's face drained of color. "You're joking." Daniel reached across the seat and unlocked the passenger door. A soft click echoed like a verdict being delivered. "Race isn't over," he said. "You want to finish or not?" The crowd caught up, circling the stalled Ferrari. Phones lifted. Gasps fluttered through the air. A few spectators murmured, "He really broke down." The embarrassment burned hotter than the afternoon sun. And with every second that ticked by, Mark felt the ground of authority sliding out from under him. There was no dramatic music, no thunder, no crash, just the quiet pressure of dozens of eyes waiting to see what the millionaire would do. Investors stood in the back, watching with pale faces, their silence sharper than any insult. Mark swallowed, the dryness in his throat almost painful. Pride battled practicality, but the cameras surrounding him left no room for escape. Slowly, stiffly, he lowered himself into the passenger seat of the very car he had mocked. The cracked leather groaned softly as he sat. The Cadillac rolled forward again, gentle and unhurried. Employees stepped aside instinctively, clearing a path for the strange procession. The humbled millionaire riding shotgun in the old machine he once called junk. Whispers followed them like shadows. "This is unbelievable. He actually got in. Man, this is brutal." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't gloat. His expression held only quiet focus as he guided the Cadillac forward. Mark stared ahead, breathing uneven, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. For the first time that day, maybe for the first time in years, he wasn't in control. And the sensation terrified him in a way no speed or risk ever had. The finish line approached slowly, the Cadillac humming with stubborn reliability. The farther they drove, the more surreal the moment became. By the time the fated had crossed the line, a dense crowd had formed, workers, guests, even a few managers who had abandoned meetings. Phones hovered like unblinking eyes, capturing the moment pride officially lost its grip. Daniel parked with the same gentle care he'd shown from the start. He turned off the engine and stepped out calmly, stretching his back as though finishing a long drive, not a public showdown. Mark followed, climbing out with trembling hands, his shirt clinging to him from heat and humiliation. The crowd murmured. He lost his own bet. He got carried to the finish. Daniel didn't say anything. He simply stood there, letting the silence breathe, letting the scene settle like dust after a storm. The weight of the moment pressed on Mark's shoulders until he thought it might crush him. He opened his mouth, searching for an explanation, but his voice cracked. And in that crack, the crowd heard everything: fear, failure, and the beginning of consequences he could no longer outrun. Silence clung to the air like humidity before a storm. Mark stood there, breathing sharply, sweat gathering at his temples as the crowd tightened around him. The finish line suddenly felt like a spotlight he couldn't escape. Everywhere he looked, phones, investors, employees whispering behind hands. No ally in sight. He tried to gather himself, tried to form words that would reclaim even a sliver of dignity. "Listen, everyone, this wasn't exactly what it looked like." His voice faltered, cracking down the middle. Cameras zoomed in as if hungry for the unraveling. An investor stepped forward, face rigid. "Mark, this is bad," he murmured, almost apologetic. Another added, "The board is watching the live stream." The words hit Mark harder than any collision could. He felt the tremor in his hands return, forcing them into his pockets just to hide the shaking. He glanced sideways at Daniel, who stood quietly beside the Cadillac, not triumphant, not mocking, just present, grounded, steady. And for a brief moment, Mark hated that steadiness more than the humiliation. It reminded him of everything he wasn't in that moment, everything he had lost the second he agreed to a race he never needed to start. Employees shifted uneasily, sensing what was coming next. Their murmurs carried through the warm air like distant static, unavoidable, growing. He said the company was on the line. One person said. "We all heard it," another added. Mark's jaw clenched. It was a joke, he snapped, too quickly, too defensively. The crowd didn't recoil. They simply watched him more closely. And somehow that was worse. The board members approached now, the chairwoman leading them with calm authority. Her shadow stretched across the pavement as she stopped in front of him. "Mark," she said, her tone controlled, "mocking an employee on camera is unacceptable." His stomach tightened. She continued, every word measured. "You created a public spectacle. You jeopardized the company's reputation. And you pulled clients and investors into it." Mark's defense crumbled before he even attempted it. He looked toward Daniel again, almost hoping the old man would speak, interrupt, deflect. But Daniel remained still, giving him space he didn't know how to fill. The crowd watched the millionaire shrink inside the silence he once commanded so easily. Pride had finally cornered him, and there was nowhere left to run. No roar of an engine to hide behind. No power to cling to. Daniel finally stepped forward, his towel hanging loosely from one hand, his voice carrying the calm strength of someone who didn't need to raise it to be heard. "I didn't race for your company," he said. A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Mark blinked, stunned, for a moment unable to process the man's kindness. "I raced because you asked," Daniel continued. "I'm not here to take anything from you. Not your title, not your job." The simplicity of the words cut deeper than any reprimand. Some employees exchanged puzzled looks. Others nodded, recognizing something rare, character in its purest form. Daniel turned slightly, addressing the space rather than any one person. "I just wanted to finish what you started." Mark swallowed, feeling the weight of those words settle onto him like an invisible hand pressing against his chest. For the first time since the race began, the tension in his shoulders released just a little, relief mingling awkwardly with embarrassment. But the consequences remained. The board chairwoman looked at Mark once more. "Your behavior still requires review." The air thickened. Mark nodded slowly, accepting a verdict that had grown inevitable long before she voiced it. The board pulled Mark aside for a private discussion, though everyone already sensed the outcome. Employees drifted back toward the building in quiet clusters, replaying the scene in hushed tones. "Never seen him look so small," someone murmured. "He really got carried past the finish line," another added, shaking their head. The parking lot buzzed with an energy that felt like both aftermath and beginning. Something ending for Mark, something shifting for everyone else. Daniel didn't linger. He walked back to the Cadillac with the same unhurried steps he had taken hours earlier, as if time moved differently for him. A few workers approached, offering shy smiles and humble respect. "You kept your cool," one said. Most people would have snapped. Daniel nodded, a gentle half-smile touching his face. Didn't need to do more than that. As he opened the driver's door, the board chairwoman approached him. "Daniel," she said quietly, "we'd like you to advise us on improving workplace culture. You handled everything with grace today." He studied her expression, searching for sincerity. When he found it, he nodded. "If it helps people treat each other better," he said softly, "I'll help." And just like that, something that began as mockery became the seed of change. Daniel eased himself into the Cadillac, the engine humming to life with its familiar, uneven rhythm. The car rolled slowly out of the lot, sunlight brushing its worn edges like a blessing meant only for those who endure without shouting. Behind him, the company stirred with whispers of consequence and transformation. Ahead, the road stretched out, quiet, open, waiting. People online replayed the clips for days afterward, not for the spectacle of the race, not for the Ferrari's breakdown, but for the quiet moment where a millionaire sat in the passenger seat of the man he mocked. The lesson echoed louder than any engine. Consistency outlasts pride, humility outshines power, and sometimes the person who speaks the least ends up rewriting the whole story. And if this moment moved you, even a little, don't scroll away. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story where arrogance crumbles, character rises, and the quietest voice proves it was the strongest all along.